My daughter-in-law pointed at my own chair, in my own house, and told me it wasn't for me. She had no idea what was in my truck outside. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 68 years old, and on Thanksgiving morning, my daughter-in-law told me to get away from my own dining room table. This seat isn't for you, she said, pointing her finger at my chair like I was a stranger who wandered in off the street. I stood there in my flannel shirt, holding a pumpkin pie I'd baked myself, and I didn't say a word. Not yet. Let me back up a little. I live in a farmhouse outside Springfield, Missouri. Built it myself, board by board, back in 1987. My wife Carol passed 4 years ago, and since then, this house has felt too big and too quiet. So when my son Danny asked if he and his wife Renee could move in, just for a little while, to save up for their own place, I said yes without thinking twice. That was 8 months ago. Danny used to call this place his childhood home with pride. Now he barely looked at the walls his own mother had painted. Renee had a way about her, sweet as honey when Danny was in the room, cold as a Missouri winter when he wasn't. Little by little, she started rearranging things. My things. She swapped out Carol's curtains for something more modern. She moved my recliner to the garage. And this Thanksgiving, she decided to host a big dinner, invite her whole family, and redecorate my dining room without asking me a single thing. When I walked in that morning, I didn't recognize my own house. New tablecloth, new centerpieces, place cards with fancy handwriting. And there, at the head of the table, where I'd sat every Thanksgiving for 37 years, was a card that read, Uncle Frank. I looked at Renee. Where am I supposed to sit? That's when she said it. This seat isn't for you, Walter. We need it for family. Family. As if I wasn't the one who built the walls around her. I set the pie down slow and easy on the counter. I looked at Danny, hoping he'd say something. He just stared at his shoes like they were the most interesting thing in Missouri. Not a single word came out of him. That silence hurt more than anything Renee had said. All right, I said quietly. I understand. I walked outside. The November air was sharp and cold against my face. I stood by my truck for a minute, looking back at the house Carol and I built our whole life in, now filled with strangers eating off my grandmother's china. Then I opened my truck door, reached into the glove compartment, and pulled out a folder I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks. I'd printed it at the library, had it notarized, everything official and legal. I walked back inside. The room went quiet when they saw my face. Renee, I said, before we eat, there's something everyone at this table needs to see. I set the folder down right in the center of her fancy new tablecloth. Go ahead. Open it. Her hand trembled just slightly as she reached for it. Renee opened the folder. Her eyes moved fast across the page, and I watched her face change from confusion to something closer to fear. What is this? She asked. That's a copy of the deed, I said. This house, all 32 acres of it, has been in my name since 1987. Every brick, every board, every nail. Still is. Danny finally looked up. Dad, why are you doing this? It's Thanksgiving. I'm not doing anything, son. Renee started it when she decided my chair wasn't mine anymore. Her mother, a thin woman named Pat who I'd only met twice, cleared her throat. Walter, surely we can talk about this after dinner. We can, I said. But there's something else in that folder. Renee, keep reading. She flipped to the second page. I watched the blood drain out of her face. See, 3 weeks ago, I'd gone down to the bank to check on something that had been bothering me. Money had been disappearing from Carol's old savings account, the one she'd left for our grandkids' college funds. Small amounts at first, $40 here, $60 there, then bigger ones, $300, $500. I'm not a man who forgets numbers, and I noticed. The bank manager, a young fellow named Curtis who used to mow my lawn as a teenager, pulled the records for me. Every withdrawal traced back to one debit card. Renee's. There's got to be an explanation, Danny said, his voice shaking now. I hope there is, I said, because right now, it looks like your wife's been stealing from her own children's future. The room erupted. Pat stood up, shouting that I was making accusations without proof. Uncle Frank, sitting in what used to be my chair, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Renee just sat there, silent, staring at the papers like they might change if she looked hard enough. I'm not here to embarrass anybody, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm here to eat Thanksgiving dinner in my own home, in my own chair, same as I have for 37 years. But I won't sit quiet while somebody disrespects this house and steals from my grandkids at the same time. Danny turned to Renee. Is it true? She didn't answer. She just started crying, the kind of crying that comes from getting caught, not from being hurt. I needed it, she finally whispered, for the boutique. I was going to pay it back before anyone noticed. The room went dead silent. Danny's hands were shaking. I'd never seen my son look so broken. You used our kids' college money, he said slowly, to fund your little shop. Danny, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months. I stood there watching my family come apart at a table Renee herself had decorated, thinking about Carol, about how she used to say that the truth always finds its way to the surface, one way or another. Then Danny said something that stopped me cold. Dad, he said, turning to me, there's something you don't know either. Danny's words hung in the air like smoke. There's something you don't know either. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about, son? He rubbed his face with both hands, looking older than his 34 years. The boutique wasn't just Renee's idea, Dad. I knew about the loan. I knew where some of that money was going. I didn't know she'd touched the kids' college fund. I thought it was coming from our savings. Renee looked at him, betrayed and betraying all at once. You told me it was fine to use whatever we needed. I said our savings, Renee, not the boys' future. Pat tried to step in again, but I raised my hand, calm and steady. Enough. Let them finish. Danny looked at me, eyes red. I've been trying to keep this family together, Dad. Renee's been stressed, the store's been failing, and I didn't want you to worry. I should have come to you. I'm sorry. I sat down slowly in Uncle Frank's chair, since mine was still technically occupied, and I let out a long breath. Anger drained out of me, replaced by something heavier. Disappointment, yes, but also understanding. My son had been trying to protect his marriage the same way I once tried to protect mine, by staying quiet too long. How bad is the store, really? I asked. Danny hesitated. We're about $6,000 behind on rent. I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle my own family. I looked at him for a long moment. Son, needing help isn't the same as failing. Hiding it is what hurts people. Your mother and I struggled our first 10 years of marriage. I never told my own father, and I regretted that silence for years. Don't make my mistake. Danny's eyes filled with tears he was fighting hard to hold back. Renee spoke up, her voice small. I was scared, Walter. Scared of losing the store. Scared of Danny being disappointed in me. I made a terrible choice, but I never meant for the boys to actually lose that money. I was always going to put it back. Intentions don't undo consequences, I said. But I hear you. I turned back to the folder still sitting on the table. Renee, I'm not going to call the police. Family doesn't do that to family. But that money gets paid back, every dollar, starting Monday. You'll set up a payment plan with the bank, and Curtis will hold you both accountable. No more secrets. No more shortcuts. She nodded, tears streaking her makeup. I'm sorry, Walter. I really am. I believe you, I said. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Time does. Hard work does. Then I looked at Uncle Frank, still frozen in my seat like a man sitting on a bomb. Frank, no offense, but that's my chair. He stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his water glass. Of course, Walter. My apologies. I sat down in my rightful place, at the head of the table, in the house I built with my own two hands, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Then Danny did something that surprised me. He picked up the pumpkin pie I brought in that morning, the one Renee had pushed aside for her store-bought desserts, and he set it right in the center of the table. This is Dad's pie, he said, made from Mom's recipe. That's what we're having today. Renee wiped her eyes and managed a small, real smile. It smells amazing, Walter. 37 years of practice, I said. Slowly, the tension in the room began to loosen. Pat quietly refilled water glasses. Uncle Frank cracked a small joke about the turkey being dry, and for the first time, all day, someone actually laughed. My grandsons, too young to understand any of what had happened, argued happily over who got the biggest dinner roll. We ate dinner that day surrounded by hurt, honesty, and the slow work of healing. It wasn't perfect. Trust doesn't come back overnight, and neither does respect. But as I looked around that table, at my son holding his wife's hand under the table, at my grandkids laughing over cranberry sauce, I understood something Carol used to tell me every Thanksgiving. Home isn't about who sits in which chair. It's about who's willing to stay and rebuild when the truth comes out. That Thanksgiving didn't end with anger. It ended with the family finally being honest with each other, for the first time in a long time. And as I looked at that empty chair Renee had once given away without asking, I knew this house, and this family, still had plenty of years left to heal, one honest conversation at a time. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, and the dishes were dried and put away, I sat alone at that same table with a cup of coffee. Looking at the empty chairs around me, I thought about Carol, about how proud she'd be that this family chose honesty over pride, even when it hurt. I thought about how easy it would have been to stay quiet, to let Renee's words slide, to keep the peace at the cost of the truth. But some things are worth standing up for. Some tables are worth defending. And some families, even the broken ones, are always worth fighting to save. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real, emotional stories every week. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to speak the truth.